Hey students, I hope you're all having a great day today. My name is Torres and I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me for a little Psych 101. In this video, we will learn about psychosocial developmental psychology. This is the third part of a three-part video series on developmental psychology. This series has three overarching ideas. Lifespan development explores how humans change, grow, and remain the same from conception to death. Human development can be studied scientifically across three domains: physical development, cognitive development, and psychosocial development. Different theories focus on the processes, patterns, generalizability, biological influences, and environmental influences on human development. The topic of this three-part video series on developmental psychology will focus on the vocabulary on these three slides. You can find this information in the Google slide presentation and in the Psych 101 Key Vocab Google Doc. Both of these files are linked in the description box below. Developmental psychologists study how students change and grow throughout their entire life, from conception through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and death. They view development as a lifelong process that can be studied scientifically across three developmental domains: physical, cognitive, and psychosocial development. Physical or biological development involves growth and changes in the body, brain, senses, motor skills, and health and wellness. Cognitive development involves learning, attention, memory, language, thinking, reasoning, and creativity. Psychosocial development involves emotions, personality, and social relationships. There is much debate on what could be considered normal development. Normative psychologists have studied large numbers of children to determine norms, or average ages, of when children reach specific developmental milestones, like crawling, walking, speaking in sentences, and starting puberty. Biological milestones, such as starting puberty, are universal. Social milestones, such as starting school, can vary considerably across cultures. Developmental psychologists have come to different conclusions concerning how exactly humans develop biologically, cognitively, and psychosocially. Some psychologists believe that children develop smoothly and continuously, but other psychologists believe that children develop more discretely in a series of stages, each of which is fairly stable. Developmental psychologists who believe children develop continuously believe that kids constantly add new lessons and skills on top of old lessons and skills as they get older. They believe that children grow at a steady, uniform speed. Even though parents can't see it with their eyes, children are growing all the time in front of them. Their bodies are making new cells, their minds learn new skills as they play and interact with people every day. On the other hand, developmental psychologists who believe children grow discontinuously believe children grow in stages as they seem to develop chunks of abilities and to experience events at certain times in life. To some parents, it may seem that their children learn to do things all of a sudden, like when a baby goes from only being able to crawl to being able to toddle around on 2 feet almost overnight. To kindergarten and first grade teachers, it seems as though their students just learned a few sight words, and now all of a sudden they can read a whole book by themselves. In these examples, it seems that these children are making physical and cognitive gains in spurts at special times, and then are not making any gains as quickly for a while in between the spurts. Another question of interest in developmental psychology is whether or not development is universal for everyone. In other words, is development essentially the same or universal for all children? Is there only one course of development, or does development follow a different course for each child depending on the child's specific genetics and environment? Are there many courses of development? Do people across the world share more similarities or more differences in their development? And how much does culture and genetics influence a child's behavior. Stage theories hold that the sequence of development is universal. For example, in cross-cultural studies of language development, children from around the world reach language milestones in a similar sequence. Infants in all cultures coo before they can babble. They begin babbling at about the same age and utter their first word around 12 months old. Yet we live in diverse contexts that have a unique effect on each of us. For example, researchers once believed that motor development follows one course for all children, regardless of culture. However, more recent research indicates that childcare practices can have a significant effect on various motor skills, such as sitting, crawling, and walking. Depending on the childcare practices of a culture, this can either accelerate or inhibit achievement in the developmental milestones associated with these physical tasks. The nature versus nurture debate is concerned with the extent to which particular aspects of behavior are either inherited or genetic, and which ones are acquired or learned. In this debate, nature is influenced by genetic inheritance and other biological factors, where nurture is generally taken as the influence of external factors after conception. So it is the product of exposure, life experiences, and learning. The general consensus is that both nature and nurture are important in development, but psychologists debate the contributions of each.
Throughout our lives, we engage in various types of interpersonal relationships that sustain, enhance, and give meaning to our existence. As infants, we depend physically and emotionally on caregivers. As school-aged children, we learn to get along with others and to abide by the rules. As adolescents, we begin to explore romantic relationships and, in other ways, seek our space in the adult world. As adults, we assume responsibility for the care and support of others, and still contribute through work to a broader society. Psychosocial development refers to the changing nature of our relationships with others over the course of our lives. It also describes how a person's personality develops from infancy to adulthood. Psychosocial psychology is very complex. It's a huge branch of the field. Because of this video will only touch superficially upon some major concepts. At times, the concepts may seem a bit disjointed, but as we work, try to remember we're looking at theories that address relationships between people and personality development. Over 100 years ago, Sigmund Freud started to develop his ideas on how childhood experiences shape our personality and our behavior as adults. Freud viewed this development as discontinuous, meaning that it developed in clear, distinct, abrupt stages. While Freud's theory in personality development has been widely studied, it has always been quite controversial. According to Freud, children go through a series of psychosexual stages that lead to the discontinuous development of personality. Each stage is driven by a pleasure-seeking energy on certain erogenous areas. Freud stressed that the first 5 years of life are crucial to the formation of adult personality. Freud viewed personality in 3 parts: the id, the ego, and the superego, and they all developed at different stages in our lives. Freud's theory suggested that the only component of personality that is present at the time of birth is the id. The id is the primary component of personality, and it is driven entirely through unconscious and instinctive primitive behaviors. Since the id is driven through instinct and primitive behaviors, it is driven by the pleasure principle, which strives for immediate gratification of all desires, wants, and needs. If these needs are not immediately satisfied, the result is a state of anxiety. Freud considered the id important early in life because it ensures that an infant's needs are met and they are more likely to survive. Society expects babies to cry out and get angry or anxious if they don't have their needs immediately met. But as a person gets older, this type of behavior would become unmanageable and disruptive and socially unacceptable. According to Freud, the ego develops from the id and ensures that the impulses of the id can be expressed in a manner that is acceptable in the real world. Ego functions in the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious mind. The ego is the component of personality that is responsible for dealing with reality. Ego is firmly rooted in real-life expectations and operates based on the reality principle, which strives to satisfy the id's desires in realistic and socially appropriate ways. In many cases, the ego can control the id's impulses by satisfying it through a process of delayed gratification. The ego will eventually allow the behavior, but only in the appropriate time and place. The last component of personality to develop is the superego, and this begins to emerge around age 5. The superego has internalized moral standards and ideals that we acquire from our parents and society. This is our sense of right and wrong. The superego provides guidelines for making judgments. The ego is constantly trying to perfect and civilize our behavior. It works to suppress all unacceptable urges of the id and struggles to make the ego act upon perfect standards rather than realistic standards. The superego is present in the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. Freud described human personality development as psychosexual because he wanted to describe the way personality develops in response to the sexual energy of the id. Freud used the term sexual in a very general way to mean all pleasurable actions or thoughts. Freud referred to sexual energy as libido. Freud proposed that personality development in childhood takes place during 5 psychosexual stages, which are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. During each stage, the libido is expressed in different ways through different parts of the body. As a person grows physically, certain parts of their body become more important as sources of potential frustration, pleasure, or both. The oral stage of psychosexual development takes place between birth and 1 year old. At this point in life, the libido is centered in the baby's mouth. During the oral stage, the baby gets satisfaction by putting all sorts of things in their mouth to satisfy the libido, and thus the demands of the id. Freud said oral stimulation could lead to oral fixation in later life. He would argue that oral personalities around us include people that engage in behavior like smoking, nail biters, finger chewers, and thumb suckers. Oral personalities engage in such oral behaviors, especially when they are under stress. From 1 to 3 years old, a child goes through the anal stage. During the anal stage of psychosexual development, the libido becomes focused on the anus, and the child derives great pleasure from defecating. The child is now fully aware that they are a person in their own right, and that their wishes can bring them into conflict with the demands of the outside world. In other words, their ego has begun to develop. Because children are typically potty trained between the ages of 1 and 3, Freud believed that when adults impose restrictions on children of when and where they can defecate, this results in a conflict with authority, and it can undermine future relationships with all forms of authority. Early or harsh potty training can lead to the child becoming an anal retentive personality who hates messes, is obsessively tidy, punctual, and respective of authority. They can be stubborn and tight-fisted with their cash and possessions. Freud believed that this was all related to the pleasure they got from holding on to their feces when toddlers. The phallic stage takes place between 3 to 6 years old.
This is the third stage of psychosexual development, where the child's desires center upon their genitalia. This is when a child becomes aware of anatomical sex differences. This is what sets in motion the conflict between attraction, resentment, rivalry, jealousy, and fear. Freud termed these complexes as the Oedipus complex in boys and the Electra complex in girls. The Oedipus complex describes Freud's idea that a child has a desire for sexual involvement with the parent of the opposite sex and is in rivalry with the parent of the same sex. The boy may fear that his father would find out about this desire and take away what the boy loves most. During the phallic stage, what the boy loves most is his penis. Hence, the boy develops castration anxiety. The little boy then sets out to resolve this problem by imitating, copying, and joining in masculine dad-type behaviors. This is called identification, and it is how the 3 to 5-year-old boy resolves his Oedipus complex. For girls, the Electra complex is less complicated. The girl desires their father, but realizes she does not have a penis. This leads to the development of penis envy and the wish to be a boy. The girl resolves this by repressing her idea for the father and substituting the wish for a penis with a wish for a baby. The girl blames her mother for her castrated state, and this creates great tension. The girl then represses her feelings and identifies with the mother to take on the female gender role. The fourth stage is the latency stage. Latency means hidden. During this stage, from 6 years old to puberty, nothing happens. The libido lies dormant, and no further psychosexual development takes place. The final stage in Freud's psychosexual theory is the genital stage. This is the time of adolescent sexual experimentation and the settling down in a loving relationship. Freud's theories only were directed at heterosexual pleasure, rather than self-pleasure like during the phallic stage. For Freud, the proper outlet of a sexual instinct in adults was through heterosexual intercourse. Fixation and conflict may prevent a person from receiving sexual pleasure through sexual intercourse. For example, according to Freud, fixation at the oral stage may result in a person gaining sexual pleasure primarily from kissing and oral sex rather than sexual intercourse. Modern psychology criticizes Freud's idea because it is highly unscientific. At this point, Freud's theory is unfalsifiable, which means that it can't be proved true and it can't be proved false. Whereas Freud's theories lacked scientific support, there is much empirical evidence focusing on the interaction of personality organization and attachment. Attachment is a long-standing connection or bond with others. Forming healthy attachments is one of the main psychosocial milestones of infancy. Attachment theory is the idea that an infant is born with a biological need to have contact with their primary caregiver in the first few months of their life. In the experimental design video that I made for this class, which I will link in the description box below, we looked at an experiment where Harlow separated rhesus monkeys from their mothers in an aim to identify factors that stimulate comfort in infants. When monkeys were given a choice between a wire mother that provided food to the monkeys and a soft cloth mother which provided comfort to the monkeys would spend most of their time with the cloth mother. The results from this experimental study suggested that love and comfort is vital for normal development, and children seek out that comfort. One psychologist especially interested in Harlow's work was John Bowlby. Bowlby was the person that coined the term attachment. He defined attachment as the affectionate bond or tie that an infant forms with the mother. The bond must be made with the primary caregiver in order to have normal social and emotional development. And he saw attachment as an all-or-nothing process.
He theorized that there is a survival advantage in the capacity to form attachment, especially in the face of a threat. In order to form a healthy attachment, caregivers must be responsible to a child's physical, social, and emotional needs. The caregiver and child must engage in mutually enjoyable interactions. With a healthy attachment, the child will see the parent as a secure base. Where a secure base has been created, the child can explore their surroundings and know that they are still safe and secure because the parent is nearby. So if something were to happen, they could run to the parent and be okay. Rudolf Schaefer and Peggy Emerson engaged in a longitudinal study where infants were observed every 4 weeks during their first year of life and again at 18 months. Using this research, they developed a model for the 4 stages of attachment. The pre-attachment stage happens from birth to about 3 months. During this time, infants do not show any particular attachment to a specific caregivers. Signals from the baby, such as crying or fussing, will attract the attention of the caregiver, and the baby's positive responses encourage the caregiver to remain close. From around 6 weeks to 7 months of age, children will develop indiscriminate attachment. Infants will begin to show preferences for primary and secondary caregivers and begin to develop a feeling of trust that the caregiver will respond to their needs. While they still accept care from other people, they become much better at distinguishing between familiar and unfamiliar people as they approach 7 months of age. They also respond more positively to the primary caregiver as compared to secondary caregivers. The next stage is discriminate attachment. From 7 to 11 months of age, infants show strong attachment and preference for one specific individual. They will protest when separated from the primary attachment figure and begin to display anxiety around strangers. After about 9 months of age, children will begin to form multiple strong emotional bonds with other caregivers beyond the primary attachment figure. During her college years, psychologist Mary Ainsworth started reflecting on the attached relationship children usually form with their motherly figure and began to wonder if there were different types of attachment relationships. She conducted the strain situation, an experiment to identify commonalities in attachment styles. The strain situation experiment is very simple. A mother and an infant are placed in a room together with toys. A stranger enters the room and the mother leaves. After a few minutes, the mother returns to the room to comfort the child. Through the strain situation, Ainsworth identified 3 styles of attachment. A 4th was later identified by other psychologists. The 4 styles of attachment are secure, insecure, resistant, anxious, insecure, avoidant, and disorganized, insecure. In a secure attachment, the child uses the parent as the secure base from which to explore. The child may have been distressed when the mother left, but they were happy to see them when they returned. This was very common where caregivers are sensitive and responsive to the child's needs. Children that have formed insecure, resistant, anxious attachments are unresponsive to the parent and did not use the parent as the secure base and did not care if the parent left. The child was slow to show positive reaction when the mother returned. This was common when caregivers are insensitive and inattentive to a child's needs. The insecure, resistant type of attachment was characterized by children showing clingy behavior, but then they rejected the mother's attempts to interact with them directly. The child did not explore the toys and became extremely disturbed and angry when the mother left. They were difficult to comfort when the mother returned. This was common when the caregiver is inconsistent with the level of response to the child. The last was the disorganized, insecure attachment. With this attachment style, the children showed odd behavior around the caregiver. They behaved oddly when the mother left, like froze, or they ran around erratically or tried to run away when the mother returned. This was very common when the child had been abused. Research indicates that people with secure attachment have a greater clarity of self-concept. Self-concept is the collection of beliefs of oneself. It helps you answer the question, who am I? Children with positive self-concept tend to be more confident, more independent, do better in school, and are more willing to try new activities. The development of a positive sense of self is the main psychosocial milestone of childhood. The development of a healthy self-concept can also depend on parenting styles. Parenting styles are different types of ways parents raise their children. Most parenting styles are made up of a mix of parental expectations, performance demands, attentiveness to rules, and the level of warmth. Based on the research of Diana Baumlein, there are 4 distinct parenting styles used in psychology today. They are the authoritative parenting style, the authoritarian parenting style, the permissive parenting style, and the uninvolved parenting style. Parenting styles are categorized based on demandingness and responsiveness. Demandingness refers to the extent to which parents control their child's behavior or demand their maturity. Responsiveness refers to the degree to which parents are accepting and sensitive to their child's emotional and developmental needs. When a parent has high demandingness and high responsiveness, they are engaging in authoritative parenting. In the United States, roughly 46% of parents use authoritative parenting style. Authoritative parents have high expectations for achievement and maturity, but they are also warm and responsive to their children. These parents give children reasonable demands and consistent limits. They express warmth and affection and listen to the child's point of view. Children of authoritative parents tend to appear happy and content, are more independent, are more active, have good self-esteem, have better mental health, exhibit less violent tendencies, and are securely attached. Authoritarian parenting have high demandingness and low responsiveness. In the United States, approximately 26% of parents use the authoritarian parenting style. Although authoritarian parenting and authoritative parenting styles have similar names, they have several important differences in parenting. While both parental styles demand high standards, authoritarian parents demand blind obedience, using reasons such as, "because I said so." They only allow one-way communication through strict rules and orders. Any attempts to reason with them may seem like backtalk. Children whose parents have authoritarian parenting style tend to have an unhappy disposition, be less independent, have poor coping skills, exhibit more behavioral problems or conduct issues, are more prone to internalizing behavior and mental issues, and appear to be insecure. Permissive or indulgent parenting have low demandingness and high responsiveness. In the United States, approximately 18% of parents use a permissive parenting style. Permissive parents set very few rules and boundaries, and they are reluctant to enforce the rules. These indulgent parents are warm, and they do not like to say no or disappoint their children. Children of permissive parents tend to have the worst outcomes. They cannot or will not follow rules. They have poor self-control. They possess egocentric tendencies and encounter more problems in relationships and social interactions. The uninvolved or neglectful parenting style has low demandingness and low responsiveness. In the United States, approximately 10% of parents use a neglectful parenting style. Neglectful parents do not set firm boundaries or high standards. They're indifferent to the child's needs and uninvolved in their lives. Many uninvolved parents may have mental issues themselves, such as depression, physical abuse, or child neglect when they were children. Children of neglectful parents are more impulsive, cannot regulate emotion, encounter more delinquent behavior and addiction problems, and have more mental issues. A number of things can influence parenting styles. One of them is child temperament, the innate traits that influence how one thinks, behaves, and reacts with the environment form a person's temperament. Someone with an easy temperament has positive emotions, adapts well to change, and is capable of regulating their emotions. They are more likely to elicit warm and positive parenting. Someone with a difficult temperament, meaning they have negative emotions, they have difficulty adapting to change and regulating their emotions, are less likely to evoke warm and responsive parenting. If you notice, all the theories of personality development that we've discussed end at childhood. This is how Erik Erikson's ideas are different. According to Erikson, personality development does not end at childhood. It continues throughout the entire lifespan. Erikson was interested in how social interaction and relationships played a role in the development and growth of human beings. Erikson theorized that there are 8 psychosocial tasks that must be mastered in order to feel a sense of competence. Each of these tasks are centered on either developing a psychological quality or failing to develop that quality. During these times, the potential for personal growth is high, but so is the potential for failure. Let's go through all 8 stages. As we discuss each stage, consider the conflict or task and the ideal outcome. The first stage of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development occurs between birth and 1 year of age. This stage is called the trust versus mistrust stage. Because an infant is utterly dependent, developing trust is based on the dependability and quality of the child's caregivers. If a child successfully develops trust, the child will feel safe and secure in the world. Caregivers who are inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or rejecting contribute to the feelings of mistrust in the children under their care. Failure to develop trust will result in fear and a belief that the world is inconsistent and unpredictable. Stage 2 is the autonomy versus shame and doubt stage. The second stage of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development takes place during early childhood and is focused on children developing a greater sense of personal control. The essential theme of this stage is that children need to develop a sense of personal control over physical skills and a sense of independence. Like Freud, Erikson believed that toilet training was a vital part of this process. However, Erikson's reason was quite different than that of Freud's. Erikson believed that learning to control one's bodily functions leads to a feeling of control and the sense of independence. Children who struggle and who are ashamed for their accidents may be left without a sense of personal control. Success during this stage of psychosocial development leads to feelings of autonomy, where failure results in feelings of shame and doubt. In the third stage of the psychosocial development theory by Erikson is initiative versus guilt. This takes place during preschool years, where children begin to assert their power and control over the world through directing play and other social interactions. Success in this stage leads to a sense of purpose. Children who try to exert too much power experience disapproval, resulting in a sense of guilt. The fourth psychosocial stage takes place during the early school years from approximately 5 years old to 11 years old. It is the stage of industry versus inferiority. Through social interactions, children begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishments and their abilities. Children who are encouraged and commended by parents and teachers develop a feeling of competence and belief in their skills. Those who receive little or no encouragement from parents, teachers, or peers will doubt their abilities to be successful. Stage 5, identity versus confusion, takes place during adolescence. This stage plays an essential role in developing a sense of personal identity, which will continue to influence behavior and development for the rest of a person's life. Teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. Success leads to an ability to stay true to yourself, while failure leads to role confusion and a weak sense of self. During the sixth stage, intimacy versus isolation, young adults need to form intimate, loving relationships with other people. Success leads to strong relationships, while failure results in loneliness and isolation. This period covers the period of early adulthood when people are exploring personal relationships. Remember that each of Erikson's stages builds on previous stages. Erikson believed that a strong sense of personal identity was important for developing intimate relationships. Studies have shown that those with a poor sense of self tend to have less committed relationships and are more likely to struggle with emotional isolation, loneliness, and depression. Stage 7 is the stage of generativity and stagnation. Adults need to create or nurture things that will outlast them, often by having people or creating a positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to feelings of usefulness and accomplishment. Failure results in shallow involvement in the world. Those who are successful during this phase will feel that they are contributing to the world by being active in their home and community. Those who fail to attain this skill will feel unproductive and uninvolved in the world. The final stage of Erikson's psychosocial theory is integrity versus despair. This occurs during old age and is focused on reflecting back at life. At this point in development, people look back on the events of their lives and determine if they are happy with the life that they have lived, or if they regret the things they did or did not do. Those who look back on life and feel their life was well lived will feel satisfied and ready to face the end of their lives with a sense of peace. Those who look back and only regret will feel fearful that their lives will end without accomplishing the things they feel they should have. The person will be left with feelings of bitterness and despair. Adolescence is an in-between stage. Adolescents are not really children, but they're not really adults. This is why it is referred to as the in-between stage. In line with both Freud and Erikson's theories, adolescence is a time for exploration of a person's identity. Peers become more important in an adolescent's life since they are trying to increase their autonomy from family and gain more personal independence. During adolescence, people are starting to establish their personal system of values. To describe the acquisition of moral development, KOHLBERG developed a theory that proposed that people move linearly through 3 levels of moral development, with each level split into 2 stages. KOHLBERG suggested that moral understanding is linked to cognitive development, more so than psychosocial development. The 3 levels of moral reasoning include pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. The first step of morality, pre-conventional morality, happens before adolescence. At the pre-conventional level, children don't have a personal code of morality, and instead moral decisions are shaped by the standards of adults and consequences of following or breaking the rules. Adolescents are typically in the second stage of moral development, and this is characterized by an acceptance of social rules concerning right and wrong. We begin to internalize the moral standards of valued adult role models. In this stage, someone might follow the rules because they want to be seen as a good person, and following the rules relates to the approval of others, or they are aware that wider rules of society exist, so they must obey the rules because it's the law. They have no choice. The post-conventional morality stage is characterized by an individual's understanding of universal ethical principles. These are abstract and ill-defined, but might include the preservation of life at all costs and the importance of human dignity. At this point, research shows that only about 10 to 15% of all people are capable of the kind of abstract thinking necessary for post-conventional morality. People that are engaging in post-conventional morality may take the point of view that protection of life is what's important at all costs, even if that means breaking the law, or people at this stage might have developed their own set of moral guidelines, which might not fit the law. Puberty typically signifies the beginning of adolescence, but there is no biological event that signals the end of adolescence. When a person reaches approximately 18, 19, 20 years of age, they are referred to as an emerging adult. Emerging adults often find that their big life plans have encountered complications along the way, and they are forced to revise their plans. These changes may start immediately after graduation and entering college or the workforce. In today's fast-paced world, many jobs are being created from year to year. More teens and young adults are becoming entrepreneurs. Relationships with partners are also unstable, as many relationships end or must be taken to the next step. Some emerging adults tend to delay significant adult responsibilities, such as marriage or parenthood, in an effort to enjoy the opportunity to exercise freedom that they now have without parents governing every move. Also, emerging adults hold a very optimistic view of the future and truly believe that they will accomplish their dreams and overcome past circumstances, such as an unhappy home life, in an effort to become the person they'd like to be. In the late 1970s, Daniel Levinson developed another theory of development for adulthood. Levinson's theory suggested that adults transition in and out of periods of stability and instability. Adulthood is the period in life where one builds and rebuilds one's life over and over. Remember, everything that is psychological is simultaneously biological. However, biological death does not necessarily happen at the same time as social or psychological death. Social death often begins earlier than biological death. Social death occurs when others begin to withdraw from someone. This can happen when someone is terminally ill or when someone is elderly. People in nursing homes may live as socially dead for years with no one visiting or calling. Social support is important for quality of life, and those who experience social death are deprived from the benefits that come from loving interaction with others. Psychic death occurs when the dying person begins to accept death and to withdraw from others and regress into the self. This can also take place long before biological death, or even social death if others are still supporting and visiting the dying person. Psychic death can even bring biological death closer. This was the third part of a 3-part video series on developmental psychology. The focus of this video was psychosocial development. In this series, we learned lifespan development explores how humans change, grow, and remain the same from conception to death. Human development can be studied scientifically across 3 domains: physical development, cognitive development, and psychosocial development. Different theories focus on the processes, patterns, generalizability, biological influences, and environmental influences on human development. For reflection, please take a few moments to consider the following open-ended question. What theories of psychosocial development do you believe apply to the experiences of your own personal lifespan? I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments below. So that's it for this lecture. I'm not sure what we're going to learn in the next lecture because I haven't quite decided yet. But before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stats with Taurus for more Psych 101. Looking forward to it. Ciao!